here's what I think we will do. One of the great things about Zoom, well, the downside right now is that we're not all sitting around a table um, up in Poughkeepsie or at the cathedral or in the Bronx or somewhere in Westchester chatting for a while. And so that's a downside. But the upside is we can gather and we're from all over the diocese here. And we represent all kinds of different programs. And so I think what we want to do is we're going to utilize the tools a little bit differently. So in the chat, I've got the chat kind of pulled up here on I'm got two monitors because my head is just crazy enough and ADD enough that I need lots of things going on. Um, we'll be utilizing the chat function as kind of a Q&A spot as like, hey, we want to make sure and talk about X, Y, or Z so that we can make sure to cover the things that you want to cover in the context of all of the safeguarding and sexual abuse, sexual misconduct policies that we're going to look at today. We want to make sure that we're answering your questions. So feel free to use the chat. SK is going to throw things virtually at me if I miss something in the chat. You can use, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a thing that says raise hand. You see the little hand that looks like this? If I'm talking and you've got a question, you're like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. See, Jesse used the raise hand just like that. He figured it out. He's like, oh no, take it away, take it away. If you hit it once, and what that does is it puts you at the very top of the screen so I can see that you have a question or you have something to say. So feel free to use that raise hand. Think of it just like we're sitting around that big table, and instead of throwing something at me to say something, you're just going to throw that hand up and we'll get right to you, okay? I also want to just remind everyone, it's going to be easier. You all are doing it, but like if we keep muted, if you're not talking, that way we don't hear everybody's background noise. You know, right now you don't hear my husband on his phone calls just on the other side of the door. It's just me that has to like stay focused, right? So if you would keep those muted, use the hand function, and then also feel free to use the chat function to put in questions or thoughts or comments, and that's what we'll do there, okay? This all sound good? Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Thumbs like, I don't really care. Whatever you want to do. It's all good. All right.
Sounds great.
Fantastic. So, let's see. So, yes. Someone call my name. I heard my name. So I just want to review just a couple of quick things, and then we're going to dive into the point of this Sustainability Institute. As most of you know, we have changed the requirements for Sustainability Institutes. Instead of coming twice a year to either Manhattan or to one of our locations where we'll do kind of a full morning or full evening event, we're now just requiring you to come to 3, but they're all virtual. So if you have put your name down and your program and SK knows, that means that your program has got one of those 3 taken care of right now. Okay? So just as a reminder, this is for anybody in your organization can represent you. It doesn't have to be the program director or any of those things. Someone asked me if they can come to more than 3. Absolutely. Come to whatever is helpful, but you have to come to at least 3. So even if you don't think anything is helpful, you have to come to at least 3 for a grant.
Do you let us know when we're supposed to come to them, when the others will occur?
Yep. So
do you let us know that?
Yep, absolutely. So one of the things that we're going to do right now is we'll put in the chat the website that Sustainability Institutes. There for the next several months, we've got them listed out right there. If you have questions that you want us to cover, let us know. We will get experts, or if we don't have experts, then you'll listen to SK or myself talk about particular policies or issues. The Sustainability Institute's, the purpose is to be responsive to needs, is to make sure that we are empowering you all to do the work that you are doing and to have you do it well. So one of the key reasons, so SK just put it up in the chat. So if you want to copy that link, you can throw it in your browser. You can see all of them. You can register right there for all the sustainability institutes. Okay. Um, like I said, we want to be responsive. The reason why our first one out of the bag is about uh, safeguarding and sexual misconduct policies and abusive policies is because when we were going through all of the BHN applications, there was a number of applications that when it said, are you compliant with our policy? They just hit no. And I was like, oh, well, that probably means we are not doing a good job of explaining what the policy is and empowering people to meet that requirement. So again, this Sustainability Institute is in response to the needs that we were seeing coming from program leaders. So continue to give us those kinds of that kind of feedback so that we can help uh, make your life better. We think we make your life better by giving checks, but we also want to make your life better by doing other things. Okay, so let us know how we can do that. All right, everyone take a breath. We're going to dive in. All right, so for this, we're going to be done within an hour. So we'll be done at 5. But we have 3 objectives for our session today. The first objective is I want everybody to understand what our expectations are of our programs when it comes to sexual abuse, sexual misconduct policies and implementation. So the first objective is so that you would know what our expectations are, to understand kind of the importance of why we are setting these expectations for our programs. And we want to provide some resources for program leaders who are trying to update their own policies. We want to give examples. Now, here's my legal clarification to make sure that we're all set. All the resources that we're going to list and what we're going to talk about in the Sustainability Institute are just for illustrative purposes. Like they're to illustrate what's going on. It's not like if you cut and paste one of these policies and you use them and it doesn't work, that you can blame it on Episcopal Charities. These are examples. We're encouraging everybody to keep working within their own parishes, within their own context. In fact, there's not a one-size-fits-all policy. And so that's really going to be up to you all to kind of discern and figure out. What we're going to do is we're going to be asking you some questions that will help you develop your policies as you're working with either your staff or your parish or legal counsel or your boards, whatever you have going on. So what we're doing is kind of offering some questions and then sharing some of our requirements of what we are going to require as a grantor. Okay? So sexual abuse and prevention. These are required for all the programs that are funded by Episcopal Charities. One of the key reasons why it's required is because as a diocese, as the Episcopal Diocese of New York has this requirement for all parishes. As you know, all of our grant money, even if you're a separate 501c3, goes to a parish. That's how our founding documents are set up. And so in order to be consistent across the diocese, we've come to this policy of requiring some kind of sexual abuse misconduct policies and procedures. What you'll find out is if you are a parish-based program, and we're going to talk about some of the distinctions here, there's kind of one general way that you can go and a separate one for our 501c3s. We know that we are working with some of the most vulnerable populations. Whether you're working in a youth program, whether you're working in food insecurity, what we do with our information, how we protect each other is critical. We know that in vulnerable populations, we have predatory people who are going after and looking at people that they think they can take advantage of, which is why these policies are not just policies that should be sitting in a notebook somewhere, like on the back shelf to say, check, we've got the policy. But our intentionality is so important to be focused in on the safety and the protection, not just of kids, but adults, our volunteers, everybody that we're working with in our organizations. Um, that's cool. No problem. Okay. So what I think is really important for us to really to think through is how you are protecting your people, how you're protecting those that are coming to you for service and are needing help and protection. Um, so, like I said, there is not a one-stop shop here, right? Just looking at the people on this call, I see youth opportunity grantees, I see a basketball program, I see after-school programs, I see a food pantry, I see working with different groups of people, I see big programs, I see small programs. So our requirements are going to have some nuance here. Our requirements are going to have, we want to have some balance. It's not, one cookie cutter that everybody has to kind of fit themselves into just right, that just feels awkward. And so what we're going to talk about are just some basic guidelines and some things that we want to think about. For instance, some of your programs are all in virtual space right now. You're doing tutoring and stuff like that. Well, one of the documents we're going to be sending everyone that attended today is a proposed policy for how to handle youth programming on Zoom. How you can make sure that you are still kind of following these kind of basic guidelines of protecting kids and making sure adults are like those relationships are being monitored in appropriate ways. Okay. So, like I said, there's a lot of nuance here that we're going to be playing with, and we're going to try to see how to work it out. One other thing I want to give us is a bit of language. For those who are Episcopalian, right, who are in diocesan churches, we often have heard language of safe church. Oh, yeah, that's not safe church. Oh, is that safe church? What's your safe church policy? And for those on the outside are like, what the hell is safe church? Well, I probably won't say that, but like they're going to say, what is safe church? And what safe church is, it's for the Episcopal Church in the USA. It's kind of the guiding um, education tool for sexual misconduct, sexual abuse prevention. There's safeguarding God's children, safeguarding churches, and there's all kinds of other kind of policies. So it's a national program that is really focused on parishes. Now, that training can be really important and can be effective, but it's hard to do that if you are trying to look at how to implement these kind of policies at CHOP, because it's very Episcopalian. It's very churchy, right? And so many of our programs don't really have that type of connection to a parish. And so we want to be able to give some flexibility there. Does that all make sense to us? Again, just so you understand, when I say safe church or something like that, what I'm really talking about is this kind of overarching principle about sexual abuse, sexual misconduct, creating policies and those kinds of things that are going to help keep us all safe. Okay. The other thing that's really unique about us is within each of your organizations, there is a variety of roles. So you're a food pantry volunteer that comes in once a month. What we're suggesting for their training should be different than a staff member who's a teacher working with youth every week, right? They're working with different populations. They have a different level of connection. So we should train them differently, okay? So we want to think about, we are not all one kind of organization. We're not working with one kind of population. And we're working at different levels of connection with people. So we want our policies to be reflective of that, okay? And we've talked about our organizational structures. Some of us are 501c3s, right? You have your own board, your own operations, that kind of thing. So that's one kind of operational distinction. And other programs are really based in the church, right? Like they are reporting to the vestry, right? They are utilizing church resources more often. There's that deeper connection. if you're trying to, there's a couple of programs on here that could kind of feel like both. Be in contact with us. We'll help you figure it out, kind of what feels right for your program. Again, we're not trying to shove programs into a particular mold. We want things to be effective for all of you. So one size fits all, that's not what we're going for. Any questions about kind of all of that kind of preliminary stuff, that preamble stuff? We're good? Thumbs up? All right, thumbs up. SK, take it away.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about what our policy is, right? So the first thing that I want to make sure that we understand is that our policies and our requirements for what our grant programs have in place in terms of policies is the minimum, right? So if your current program or your parish has stricter requirements in terms of what you do for sexual misconduct policy and prevention, you follow those. If our requirements are stricter, more strenuous, however you want to think of it, you go with ours. Does that make sense? Awesome. Because like, as Patrick said, we're really just trying to create the safest environment that we can for our guests. So if you are a 501c3 program, so you're a larger organization, you're going to provide Episcopal Charities with your sexual abuse and misconduct policies and your process for how you handle the issues that come up. So in a minute, I'll share my screen and show the required modules for various roles within programs. But the other thing for 501c3 larger organizations is while we're not holding you to the safeguarding Episcopal Church language policies, we do want you to hit the same kinds of topics, right? So we want to, while we're not doing a one size fits all policy, we want to make sure that we're all hitting the same important topics. So with that, actually, why don't I go ahead and share so we can take a look at this chart? Maybe.
Do you want me to share mine?
Sure, would you? Actually, that might be great, so I can keep talking.
You can keep that up.
Thank you. While you're getting that, so parish-based programs, you will use the safeguarding resources that are required by the diocese. So another kind of important thing for parish-based programs is that we're in contact with your clergy and your vestry and the leadership of your parish to understand what the requirements are within your congregation. So this is a little chart that shows you what people are required to take what safeguarding modules. And again, for 501c3s, you'll all get these materials after this meeting. We'll send you a big packet with all of this information. And for 501c3s, we're really looking at the kinds of topics that are covered in these modules. So if we look at this table,
those materials?
yes, that will be sent to you by email right after this call.
Okay.
So if we look on this table, any box that says yes is a requirement of Episcopal Charities. So if you see here the program director and the clergy in charge of any program, they are required to do all of these modules in the blue and the orange. And these last green other modules are REC, which means recommended. So we're not requiring that you do those modules, but we're saying that they are good resources there if you would like to use them. And as you kind of see as we make our way, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to make a point. These are in line with the bishop's guidelines and requirements for clergy. Clergy are required to do this every 5 years, and the first time they have to do it in person, but I don't know how they're going to deal with that in the context of COVID. But so again, we're not saying you have to do this every year, but it does need to be done on a regular basis. Sorry, I just want to make sure that was clear that it does.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Sync up with the bishop's requirements for clergy.
Absolutely. Thank you. So the thing with this is that while we have different requirements in terms of what volunteers, for example, are required to do. So you'll see that after school program volunteers, only required module that they have is the abuse prevention refresher, which is kind of a general module that most people within your programs will do. So while they don't have to have all of the trainings, the idea is that someone on site does, and someone on site is enforcing those policies and making sure that everyone, while they may not know all of the details of the policy or been trained in them, they know that they exist and they're complying with them. Does that make sense? Very cool. And we can help you to put together materials to train a group if that's something that you're interested in. So as Patrick said, these are aligned with the bishop's requirements and the diocesan requirements for safeguarding, and we can put you in contact with the right people to figure out who you need to talk to, or to put together materials to train a group at your program. So
we have to request that. Do we have to request that if we want the group training?
Yes.
Program?
Yes. So
by email or?
By email is great. I will, here, let me drop my email in the thing.
Okay.
And like I said, we'll send all of these materials to you at the end of today. But if you are using the safeguarding software, you'll need to contact your parish safeguarding administrator. So if you don't know who that is, we can help you find out who that is. Go ahead, Patrick. Did you want to add something?
Judith has a question, I think.
Oh, yes. Judith.
We took a course online, actually, about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. It was several hours long. Now, is that the same as this material, or is this something different? Yeah. And is that still, is a 3-year, what is the time limit on having had that training?
You're good.
Oh. You are good. It's every 5 years. That's correct, right? Every 5. Yep. So you are all good, Judith. And I am putting into the chat also Andrew Gary's email, who is the diocesan administrator, who can help connect you with your parish administrator if you're not sure who that is. And as I said, we're more than willing to help you put together materials to do it as a group. And you can, the great thing about this time is we could do that via Zoom or another platform to get a group from your program together virtually to do this training. Let's see here.
Good. And so just notice that there's a lot of boxes filled in, but the most yes boxes are for those who are leading.
Exactly.
So
yes,
that's the big point.
That's right. And so like I was saying before, the importance is that people are aware that there are policies and someone is there to ensure that we're following them and to communicate that those exist. So for your volunteers, for example, the way that you're training and communicating with new volunteers is really key for this. So this is a great thing to cover in a volunteer orientation. What kinds of policies do you have? What are you communicating with volunteers about those policies, and what do they need to know while they're volunteering with your program?
So I think this sense of talking to your volunteers is really critical, right? Whether you have a formal volunteer orientation or you're taking someone around on that first day that they're at the pantry and you're walking them through kind of, here's how we work, you put this over here, you do this. How are you incorporating some of these policies into that conversation? Hey, just so you know, we're never allowed to be in a room by ourselves with any kids. And making sure that is put out there at the very front. One of the things I find really difficult, especially with volunteers, is that volunteer who's been with you for 15 years, who has been doing this since before you got there, and they know how to do it. You got to bring them on board. Like, we have to be consistent with these kinds of policies. I know I've been in churches, I've worked in them. I know it's hard, but being consistent. So while there's a lot of things that are recommended for like a volunteer at a food pantry or a feeding program, what the reason why we want people trained who are supervising is so that they can begin to communicate those policies and create that environment for everyone. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of what we're looking at here.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So again, some organizations, each of your organizations are going to be slightly different in how you do this, and that's fine. But the important thing is that you're having these conversations, and then not only having the conversations internally, but then you're communicating them outwardly as well. Sorry, SK, I didn't mean,
No, you're good.
I'm in
And
there.
another thing along those lines that I was just going to add in terms of kind of creating the environment where we know that this is a thing that we're thinking about is one thing that may be good to consider is what you have posted on the wall, what you have written up and printed and posted for people to see. I mean, I think that gives you credibility that you know what you're doing and you've got your bases covered, and it really creates that environment for your staff and your volunteers and your guests that this is something that's important and that you're thinking about.
Evelyn, yes. So when you get this printout, everything that's asterisked, that has an asterisk next to it, which is all the Safeguarding God's Children, some of the Safeguarding God's People, are in English and Spanish, and some are in French as well. Jeff.
Do you have any posters already made up by any chance?
We don't, and chiefly because everybody is so different. Every program is so different. What I would encourage you to think through are like to go back to the CHOP policies and be like, what are the 4 things we need to highlight here? Or what are the 3 or the 4 or the 5 that are going to be kind of the road rules for us at Fred's Pantry? We will always do things together. We will always keep client information confidential. We never share confidential information with another volunteer or another program participant. Someone who comes up and says, hey, Dolores usually comes in here on Tuesdays. What's her phone number? And if it's someone you know, you're like, oh, Dolores is, oh, she'd love for you to have that number. So how do we communicate to our volunteers that mean like that have good intentions? No, you never give out information. If someone asks for that, then direct them to you, Jeff, or whoever, whatever your process is, but know your process and be able to communicate that. Jeff, if you're having trouble kind of finding stuff or kind of what might, reach out to us and we'll work with you. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Do you want to do the implementation pieces? Kind of done most of those, haven't we?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of that. I was just going to answer, Alan had a question in the chat about volunteers who are packing food bags for a food program and if they need to have the training. It's on that what is required. I think that they may, no, I'm lying to you. They're recommended to take some of the modules. So that's a great example of a place where someone who is present should know what those policies are and communicate that with those volunteers, but they don't need to sit through the hours of training on top of things.
So Alan, what that can be is if you kind of boil down your policies and like, hey, this is how we're going to function. Like, we don't give out client information. We are not in a room by ourselves, whatever your kind of big things are, then talking with your volunteers that are packing bags and saying, hey, we need to take 5 or 10 minutes here, and we're going to talk through these things. Now, what a lot of organizations are going to do with that is once they have that conversation, they're going to have them sign off and say, like, I know the rules of the road. I know that this is what we do. And then you just kind of remind people about it every once in a while. So your volunteers that come in, if you get any kind of information from them, which you probably should be getting information about their name, their email address, right? You want to contact them. On those forms, you can easily put, here are our couple of rules. This is how we're going to function. And so when they're filling out that volunteer application, they're also being able to see who you are as an organization, what's important to you. And when they're signing off on that, now you have, it's not like, oh, you sign this, damn you. Like but it's about saying, we are all on the same page with this. We are all together in this. And then what that does is that goes into your volunteer notebook, right? So now you've got your notebook full of all the information you need to kind of find people, but then you also have them saying, I get it. Here are the rules of the road. This is how we're going to function as a community and as a team. So that's a great question, Alan. So again, if there are kind of those specific groups, like who needs to do this? Do I need someone? Do I need to do this? This is where that chart can be helpful. And then a conversation with us and saying, what do you think? And we'll advise you as to what we think. That's a great question, Alan. Thanks for putting that in the.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a big fan of the volunteer sign-off sheet, just to be honest with you. And it's not just some legal thing. You're inviting someone into your community. Like one of the things I love about like food pantries in particular is almost everyone that I go to, they talk about what a community the group of volunteers becomes. Regular volunteers get to know each other, right? Where were you? When I first moved to New York City, I started volunteering at a food pantry, and it was the food pantry crew at Crossroads who said, I was like, oh, I think someone called me about an apartment. And they were like, stop working right now and go look at it, because I didn't know apartments go quick, right? That community is there. And so by putting down, this is who we are, and this is how we're going to function beyond just sexual harassment, sexual misconduct policies, but just in general, this is who we are. This is how we're going to function. Do you want to join us? Welcome. So let's sign. But you need to know who we are, right? And if you don't want to be with us, no worries. But this is who we are. Does that make sense? So a lot of this is really just trying to communicate to your organization, to your volunteers, to your staff, who you are and how you're going to function. You're going to talk about the places that are off limits. You're going to talk about things that are in bounds. If you start having this kind of conversation with a client, maybe you should take that conversation to a staff member or to the program leader, because that's probably above your pay grade, right? Most of you have policies in your programs not to give money to clients that come through. That's a thing I would put right there. And so then what it does is it helps you in your orientation of a new volunteer, because now you've hit your most important points. You've had them sign off on it. So if you see them like slipping a guy a 20, you're like, hey, that's not who we are. Like, there are reasons we have policies.
Can I ask what would be wrong in giving somebody something, money?
So
Like if
often,
they needed the money for car fare or something like that?
right. So it would be more of a program director making that decision, because they know the whole group, they know people. If it's an individual volunteer making that call, they don't know with any regularity who is coming up to them. So if program leaders want to pay for car fare or something like that, that's not a problem. But having an individual, having that much power in an individual volunteer, think about it. A person is coming to a food pantry because they need food, right? That's life-giving. Like that's a lot of power that a volunteer has. And so what we want to do is take that decision, like, oh, should I give them 20? Well, I don't really have 20 to give, but they need it more than I do. We want to take that bit of decision making away from that volunteer and just say, you don't have to worry about that. Send them to me and I'll make that decision.
Okay.
We want to take that pressure off of the individual.
Okay. Like off the volunteer, right?
Yeah, off the volunteer. Again, the program director, the program leader, that's all your call. And again, have whatever policy is good for you all. These are things that I have seen and we have seen that are effective and not effective. But the key to it is making sure that you're communicating whatever it is your policy, whatever your policy is, to your volunteers, to your staff, to everyone you're working with, so that you're all on the same page.
Thank you.
Courtyard, never inside and sponsored a safe church seminar church for 1 year ago. So we covered. So Priscilla asked a specific question about it's their own church parish that they ran a safe church seminar about a year ago. You guys are going to be covered. And I would say I forget most of the stuff I learned at seminars, right? So even if you've done the training, how are you still going to be communicating to your volunteers? This is who we are. Just a reminder. You're not trying to like force feed anybody, but you are saying, listen, for the purpose of your grant, you're covered, you're fine. But in trying to communicate who you are to your volunteers and to your people, I would encourage you to keep finding ways of saying, listen, this is how we're going to function. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to keep each other safe. This is how we're going to keep each other this is how we're going to be moving together in the same direction. Let's see, other questions? Or SK, do you have any other kind of thoughts before we're going to go into Q&A?
I was just chatting a little bit with Kenneth here, and I just wanted to share a little bit of it. We were talking about the volunteer sign-off sheet and what that means and what that looks like. And something that we were talking about was that it's sort of a community covenant, right? Like that, I think that's what Patrick was kind of getting at there, that it's how are we going to be in community and moving forward in community and making sure that we all kind of agree on those things. I just thought that language might be helpful.
And what can be really great about this is this can be a really interesting thing for your core volunteers to get together on. Mm-hmm. So Jeff, at Fred's Pantry, it may be if you're doing a volunteer event or a volunteer Zoom, it's going to be starting to say, what are our core things that we're going to do or not do? And what happens is you begin to build buy-in from your volunteers. And there's great ways of facilitating that. You kind of move people this way or move people that way or bring things in. Like there's all kinds of ways of doing this. But one opportunity for you is to kind of bring that in. And that's my guess is like at Epic, right? At Evelyn with Epic is your Epic kids like got together in their house because they're all living together and said, this is how we're going to live in our house. We're going to have quiet hours, or we're going to not do this, or we're going to have Sunday dinner together, right? So they created those things for the program. In a similar way, we want to create those kinds of covenantal kind of, this is how we're going to do things for the outreach that we do. So not just for them as a household, but when they're doing tutoring and working at Grace Immigration, right? We want to work them. We want to figure out how they're going to do that well. Yeah, Evelyn.
We do have, I have a very big policy, caseworker, and I have an immigration caseworker, and they're not allowed to meet with anyone by themselves. And so there has to be, this is not like, it's like the children, when I have my ESL classes for children, we have two adults. Well, we have two adults together. You just never know. And, I just think it's a safety thing. And I look at these young women as my kids.
Yeah.
And that's what I would teach my kids. And it's no different with our volunteers. I tell them, please do not be at the food pantry by yourself. Make sure there's someone with you because you never know. So yeah, I think that's important that you have a buddy system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have peace of mind that I don't have to be there all the time because they do have buddies.
They're going to be together.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And again, what I want to emphasize here is every one of your programs are going to be different, right? They're going to require different things, but there are some basics that they will probably share. Not being alone is probably one of them. How you're going to deal with information, private information, is going to be another one. How you communicate. If there's ever a problem, who does someone talk to? If someone feels unsafe in your program, does everyone have a sense of who they would go talk to? Or who they would reach out to and how they would reach out to them? So one of the ways to do this is to say, like, in this kind of covenant, or, if you kind of, whatever the language you want to put to it, if you kind of do a community covenant, here's the 6 things that we're going to be about. We're all signing off on it. And then you print that thing and you throw it up all over your volunteer areas. Hey, remember, this is what we're about. This is how we're going to protect each other. We're not here alone. Whatever those things are. And by putting them up in places where you see them, then it reminds you, right? And if you ever have a problem, come see Patrick at this number or this email address. So you're giving people, you're empowering people to like, wait, I do not feel good. I do not feel safe. Or we've all worked with volunteers. Some volunteers, like I've had to excuse and say, you are not allowed to come here anymore, right? And the reason I was able to do that is because someone came to me and said, Patrick, this guy is not being appropriate, and able to talk about it, understand it, because they knew where to go when something felt uncomfortable. They knew there was someone they could go to, and they knew exactly who to go to, so that we could come in as an organization and remove that situation, remove that person from the situation, and say, you're not welcome here anymore. And what it does is it takes the pressure off your volunteers. Because now, once they reported it to me as the program director, part of my conversation with them is like, I got it. You don't have to worry about anything. I'll take care of it. I'll make the decisions. I'll have the hard conversation. I'll take care of that, right? That's a gift that you give to your volunteers. And they're going to feel safer, and they're going to feel more connected to your program because you've taken care of them and they knew what to do, right? So it's not just having the list of things that this is who we are, this is what we do, this is how we function, but it's also making sure that people have an avenue in case something goes wrong. They have an avenue of who to talk to if something goes wrong, okay? Let me highlight just one more thing, and then we'll do some kind of open question and answer, and we got about 10 minutes left for Q&A. But one of the things I will encourage you all to do, again, this is not a requirement, but if you're going to have volunteers, and especially if you're going to have volunteers working anywhere near kids or youth, they should have a volunteer application. Background information on them, along with, why do you want to do this? How did you hear about us? And then doing a background check. The packet we're going to send you has links that have different ideas for background checks. If you want to do background checks, they've got links for different volunteer applications. The other thing that I think is really important on a volunteer application, and this is something I've implemented in every parish that I've worked at, is if they're going to be a regular volunteer with me, they have 2 references. And I pick up the phone and I call. Now, does that block every crazy person coming in? No. But it does call a lot out. And it gives me as a program leader a better picture of who I'm going to be working with. So anytime I had, when I was running children, youth, and family programming and stuff like that in churches, anytime anyone was going to be in the nursery, anytime they were going to be a Sunday school teacher or a youth leader, fill out the volunteer application. And before they were in with kids, I was on the phone. Hey, tell me about Patrick. Do you think they'd be fun with kids? Do you see any problems? Great, thanks so much. So again, you want to talk to your own community, legal people, all that kind of stuff that you want to do to see if those are things that are appropriate for you. But I'm a big fan of volunteer applications. Trying to see any last things on my must cover list. Policy, right. Yeah, just as a reminder, we're not here to judge all your policies. We're here to ask questions so that you can have really good policies that are going to fit your unique places. Okay. So let's do more question and answers. If people have questions or comments that they want to make, this is your time. You can just unmute yourself. See, look, you all are.
I'm wondering about liability insurance. And is this being done, and if so, or recommended, and if so, at what level of administration?
So I'm probably not a good person to ask about specifics of liability insurance, but your priest in charge has, in all likelihood, has liability insurance for the church for the activities that you're doing. Because it's a parish sponsored, because Angel is a parish sponsored thing, it should be covered under liability. But it's also, if you're feeling nervous about that, your church has an insurance agent. It is an easy thing to reach out and say, help me understand my policy. This is what we're doing. Is there anything you're recommending? Those kinds of things. So I would reach out to whoever is kind of who has your policy, and they will be able to give you some better answers. But most likely you're covered under your parish liability stuff. But again, I would reach out to your priest in charge. That's a great question, though. Other questions or thoughts from people? Oh my goodness. We might get done early. I feel like I should come up with 7 minutes worth of things to talk about or something like that. I want you to get the full impact of a Sustainability Institute here. Before I do let you go, let me check one more thing. And SK, check if you got another 6 minutes. We've got 6 minutes.
The lady, I believe it was the lady, say SK.
Uh-huh.
You mentioned that number one, if you're a 501c3 program, that there was a couple of things you said. One, that they have to deal with the sexual behavior abuse, and then policy. That would be a program that we would have to show. That was one of the things, but I didn't get the second one. You had mentioned a second one. You said that we would have to show that one is that our sexual abuse policy, what's that? Then there was another one. Then you said that we would hit on some kinds of, other topics. Do you remember? It was in the pretty towards the beginning.
Yeah, so I think what I was talking about was that the topics that are covered by policies or trainings for 501c3 programs, if that's different than the safeguarding training and curriculum, which and we can talk offline too, because I think that at WANA you're kind of in one of those positions where you could be either way in terms of whether you go a separate organization route or what the diocesan requirements are. But the idea is that if you're using different policies or different materials than the safeguarding, that you're just hitting the same kinds of topics that the safeguarding curriculum covers.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
And Sandra, we're really happy to talk through, like, because I know WANA is a little bit different with between the food pantries and the shelter and the summer camp program. There's all kinds of things built in there. So let us know, and we're happy to kind of talk through that with y'all.
Well, probably, you know, after, but definitely I want to work with you on the group, helping the group, teaching the group some kind of program, because I like to do the workshops.
Yeah.
And so I think that if I could learn a little bit more about what you're, you know, discussing and everything, I would love to teach that, because we're getting new people all the time.
Yeah. Fabulous. Yeah. Shoot us an email. Let's find some time to talk.
Okay.
And again, remember if we're kind of boiling all this down, what we want to communicate, what we want to understand is how we're going to take care of each other, how we're going to take care of the vulnerable populations that we work with, how we're going to communicate that to them and to our volunteers, right? The specifics are going to be very different between CHOP and WANA. Like different programs, different areas, different services. But the key components, that what's boiled down is this really important thing about how we're going to take care of each other and then how we're going to communicate that. Okay?
Yeah. How to communicate, yeah.
All right. Well, I will make an announcement next week, next Thursday at this time. We're going to have another Sustainability Institute for those who are interested. It will be for programs that are working with youth online, that are doing kind of Zoom programming, that kind of thing. If that's you, or if that's something you're interested in doing, we're going to talk through like what's worked for people. It's going to be a real open conversation with each other. We're going to bring a little bit of information in, but a lot of it's going to be like, tell us what's working, tell us what's not working, to really be in conversation with each other. So if that's you, you're welcome. That would get you 2 credits. That's 1 this week, 2 next week, then you're almost done. Then you can keep coming all the time just for fun. Okay. With that, unless there's another hand or anything like that, I will let us go. 2 minutes early. My professor husband would be furious with me. We'll see y'all later. Be safe.
Thank
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.